This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. It is I, Old Gingerface. Thank you for being here, everybody. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the recent rating and reviewing. Very cool. And the new Patreon supporters. That is really awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. The show has certain expenses, and when you guys step up and contribute monetarily, it's really appreciated. It kind of takes care of everything in that way, and it keeps keeps me from having to go after sponsors and make deals, and which I've done in the past. But that's even more work than I'm able to handle, honestly. As you know, I do when available. I usually do over 70-hour work week just to pay the bills and keep the household going. So not having to deal with sponsors and making deals with them is preferable. But rest assured, the show will remain free as always. The 4 episodes a month, getting you these stories from the men and women of law enforcement and what they actually do and see on a daily basis is kind of the whole point. So what you get with Patreon is 2 more episodes a month of Cops in the News, kind of a topical news story. A couple of friends come on. We kind of crack wise on what's going on, and you'll get the shows early and you'll get them ad free. So that's kind of what you get, and the link is in the show notes for that. Really excited for today's guest. I kind of just blindly reached out to him. He's a bit of a law enforcement legend, and he responded, "Hey, sure, I'll come on." I was like, "Damn, that was easy. I should do that more often." So I'm really excited to have him. He's retired special agent and veteran undercover operative with the ATF. Joined the ATF in 1987 and was involved in more than 500 undercover operations in his 27-year career, notably infiltrating the Hells Angels as part of Operation Black Biscuit. He's also a New York Times best-selling author of No Angel, My Harrowing Undercover Journey to the Inner Circle of the Hells Angels. Without further ado, let me bring on the great Jay Dobyns. Jay!
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I'm so happy you agreed to come on. I think I know your name. I knew your name. It was familiar to me, but I think a fan of yours or a fan of yours and of the show reached out and was like, "You should get this guy." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll give it a try." New York Times best-selling author and all that. And you wrote back right away, man. I appreciate that.
I think what you do is important, and I think there's young lawmen and lawwomen out there that need our support and need our encouragement and need to hear our enthusiasm for the things they do. And so I appreciate you for trying to push that forward.
Thanks, man. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it's the mission of the show it's been really cool to see it come to fruition over the last 5 or 6 years. Every time I'm thinking like, man, it's kind of a lot to do the show or to schedule people or to edit, I'll end up getting the emails of encouragement from other people or people that were like, "Hey, I'm a cop now because I heard such and such guest on your show," and I'm like, "Damn, I can't stop doing it. I gotta keep doing it." So I really appreciate that, man. You had a wild career. Just when you were going into law enforcement, I have to ask you, were you all about the undercover stuff? Is that what you wanted to do, like above any kind of like more typical law enforcement?
Yeah, that was my motivation. I wanted to at least try it. I didn't know if I'd be any good at it or not. I'm still not even sure that I was good at it, to be quite honest with you. There's dozens of agents and officers out there, men and women, who I look at in the undercover game who I feel were better at it than I was. But I wanted to try. I think the one thing that I had going for me, beyond any skills that I either had or developed, was willingness. I was always willing to try. I was always willing to raise my hand. I can't remember any event where anybody ever asked me to participate or asked for help or have an opportunity out there that I said no to. And so, I was looking for opportunities to work undercover. If the opportunities weren't there, I was creating them. but that was the focus of my career. Yes.
It's awesome, man, and thank God for people like you too, because it's a little bit for someone like me who I'm just on patrol, just a straight up copper. It's like as a cop, you're already willing and volunteering to be put into like confrontation, just the everyday stuff of just going to calls, and you're gonna just kind of be inserted into people's lives, and you're okay with dealing with that type of thing. But to me, the undercover thing is like it kind of is scary to me. Like I like having to like make this persona and have it believable, and then even doing it for the first time, not knowing if it's going to work. I mean, obviously, you were at least at the very beginning believable. Like people believed that you were the role you were playing. So that those are little successes when you first start out that have to give you some encouragement, right?
Well, first, I think that the men and women out there on patrol that are in uniform, that are responding to calls, they are the most important element to the law enforcement community. And you're encountering people every day that you're meeting them on the worst day of their life, and expected to solve their problems. Every morning or afternoon or evening, an alarm clock goes off, and those men and women, they put their feet on the ground and they pour their kids a bowl of Cheerios and have a cup of coffee with their husband or wife. And then they go leave their families with no guarantee that they ever get to come back and see them again, to give some unknown other family the guarantee that they get to see their loved ones. And they go to work knowing that they're facing the defund the police movement, that they're going to be videotaped, they're forced to wear body cams, they're going to be spit on and harassed and bad-mouthed and ambushed, and they still go. They still go to work knowing that the world has stacked the odds against them and doesn't always appreciate what they do, and they still go. As a retired lawman, I continue to honor and respect and admire that. Like for people like yourself that are doing that in the undercover game. The second half of your statement or question there, the undercover game, like Hollywood and television, have given us this illusion that it's this sexy, glamorous world.
Yeah,
I found
absolutely.
firsthand that it's not. It's not what the entertainment business has created or brainwashed us into believing. It's a nasty, dirty, bloody, vomit-covered scab of a life. When I came to the realization of that, when I came to understand that this isn't the movies, it's not Miami Vice, I still loved it, man. I loved every day. I loved the challenge of it.
Yeah, man, that's incredible. That's you're definitely a special type of person to do that kind of work. They like you said, it's glamorized, and but I've had a few of you guys on now who have done big cases or kind of lived the life for like more than a few months, like years even, and it is like it can be incredibly destructive to your personal life because it's like you have a mission you're on, and everybody in your peripheral is gonna suffer in some way because of what you're dedicated to.
That is the biggest regret of my career. The biggest regret of my life is that, and this sounds like an excuse. It's not. It sounds like it's a blame. It's not. I own every decision I ever made. But living that life, you can't treat it like a hobby. You can't dabble in it. People
Right.
that treat undercover work like a gimmick end up hurt or end up dead. You have to be on, and you have to be committed to it. Uh, and the regret is that I was committed to it, that it did become my life. It became who I was. It became more than what I did for a living. It became who I was. And in that process, I put a huge amount of battle damage on my wife and my kids. The people that loved me the most, the people that supported me the hardest, are the ones that I treated the shittiest. I took
Yeah.
them for granted, and I kept falling back on this internal mantra that, like, I'm trying to change the world, I'm trying to save the world. And while I was out working these cases, I was ignoring my own family and my own family's problems. And that's a huge regret. It's shameful to say. It's a humiliating statement to make about yourself to your audience who they don't know me. Um, and
Yeah.
I don't want to start this off by being negative, but I think that's something that we have to pay attention to, is that our families are paying the price for our profession and our dedication and commitment to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I've heard that over and over. And I think for men in particular, it's easy to fall into, because I think men are, in my opinion, are mission driven. Like our lives, we need a mission, we need something to work on. And if you have that mission, it takes all of you. Even with just working the job I'm at, there's plenty of hours, there's plenty of extra hours to be worked. I can easily just put my nose to the grindstone and be like, all right, I'm going to be gone 80 hours, and I won't see my kids when I'm working. I won't put them to bed, and I won't see them in the morning because I'll be gone before they wake up. And I've done that to myself before. I've often thought, like, man, maybe I'm working a little too much because I'm missing stuff, and I'm almost forgetting to care about missing it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that for all of us, we have to focus on what the job truly means. We have to defend the weak. We have to protect the innocent. And in that process, it becomes overwhelming and it becomes all consuming. But our families are part of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as we get consumed by this job, many times we have to go home to remind ourselves of what it truly is that we're fighting for.
Absolutely. Well said, man. Absolutely. That's great for young guys out there to hear too. Jay, when you started, when I was reading up on you, and fascinating your life, and I was kind of surprised by hearing when you were in FLETC. Is this true that you were recruited for the NFL?
I had a very nice college football career. I had a successful college football career, and I went to the 1985 NFL Combine, which was the NFL's meat market. And I went there with I never had a plan B. My plan A was to play professional football. And so during the combine workouts, they group you together with other candidates, and they test you. They weigh you, they measure you, you run, you jump. And I thought, man, this is my opportunity for my plan A, my life's plan, to come true. 10 minutes into those workouts, I realized I wasn't going to be a professional football player.
Yeah.
These guys that I hadn't really heard of could do things that I couldn't do. They were more athletic than me. They were faster than me, stronger. They could jump higher. They were incredible athletes. As it turns out, in my group was Andre Reed, who was ultimately became a member of the Buffalo Bills, played in 4 Super Bowls. He's in the Hall of Fame. Another young man, kid, who was in my group was Jerry Rice, who's the greatest football player, pass catching machine that we've ever known. Right? So I wasn't judging myself against the fairest competition. But to answer your question, while I was in the academy, the NFL went on strike, and they were looking for, lack of better terms, they were looking for scab players to come in.
Right. So they had notes on you, probably.
Games. So, like, I was a sloppy second choice, but I realized it at the combine, and I had a new career. I had a new life, and I wanted to take all that passion and energy that I had previously put into an athletic career and apply it to law enforcement. And so, I got it. I had no illusions about myself. If I would have stepped away and gone into that scab league NFL, it wouldn't have lasted. They weren't going to stay on strike forever. And as soon as the real players came back, I would have been sitting on the sidelines again.
Yeah. Yeah,
looking for a job.
right. You made the right move. I just thought that was incredible. It is the level at which the pros play in all these sports is totally insane. Even like I always taken back when I was a kid going to Fenway for the first time, and I've been to football first, and those guys were kind of amazing because they're huge. And I went to the Patriots game when they were terrible, and after the game they let us come on the field and meet them. They were that bad. They were like, anybody want to come down to the field? So we went out, but they're monsters, you know. But when I went to a baseball game, you walk out in Fenway, and these guys were like my dad's size, average size guys. But then to see them, how fast they were, and to see them hit a ball that's going 100 miles an hour over the green monster was unbelievable. I'm like, these guys, the next level coordination, all that stuff.
Any professional sport that you like put close eyes on, that
right.
you become personally present for. I don't care what it is, whether it's baseball, basketball, football. You go watch a professional hit a golf ball. They all reinforce to all of us how unathletic we truly are.
And you were close to them too. You were there. You were at the combine at least, you know.
You know, you look at football's what I'm familiar with. You look at whoever the worst team in the league is, and then you find whoever the worst player on that team is. That guy is an amazing athlete, an incredible athlete. You know, in retirement, I've been trying to teach myself how to play golf. I'm 63 years old, right? Nothing will show you how unathletic you are than trying to hit a little ball sitting still right in front of you.
Yeah. Golf is one of those sports where I've dabbled in it my whole life, and it's fun when you first start because you have a reason not to be good. But then when you start playing more, that's when the urge to break the club over your knee comes in, because it's like, I thought I was getting good, and now today I suck.
I play, I practice, I put some effort into it, and I still suck.
That's funny. Jay, can we go back to your early career? And I have a feeling what you're going to talk about, but the first question I always ask is your first hot call, or the first call that you got that really got your blood going. Can you talk to us about that?
I got hired on a Monday in November of 1987. 4 days later, on a Thursday, I was part of an arrest operation. One thing led to another. I ended up getting taken hostage by the suspect.
Insane.
Ultimately, I was shot in the back, point blank, by the suspect. The bullet went in my back. It went through my lung. It narrowly missed my heart. It exited my chest. You know, and after 4 days on the job, I was laying in the dirt and garbage and dog shit of this trailer park, bleeding to death. Ugh. There was blood coming out of my chest like you're holding your thumb over the end of a garden hose.
Oh my gosh.
With the feds, with ATF, we get paid every 2 weeks. I hadn't gotten a paycheck yet.
Oh my God.
I was dying with a couple extra holes in my chest and in my back, and hadn't. I mean, I comped them that one. It was on the house.
Oh my gosh! How do you get into a situation like that?
You know, I was brand new on the job. I didn't know anything about anything, and I was like in this very much removed position from the point of attack. The suspect ran, and I instantly that athlete's mentality instantly kicked in, and I gave chase. And so I was running past experienced agents, not knowing what I was doing.
Right.
But like, I wasn't fast enough by NFL standards, but by cop standards, I was Usain Bolt.
Very right? Fast. Yeah.
and I could run in Copland. I could run in the world of professional athletics. I was mediocre.
Right.
So in the chase, we lose the suspect. We were in his neighborhood, and he knew all the hiding places. And in this effort to try to serpentine around and search for him, he was laying in wait, and he was hiding. And he popped up, and had a gun out on me and put the gun to my head and pushed me into a vehicle, an ATF vehicle, a government car that was there, and was demanding that I drive him to his escape.
Oh my gosh.
And so in those, in those crazy moments, I did find a sense of calm in that. I was like, okay, look, if I drive this guy away from here, I'm going to be executed on the side of the road 10 miles down the road. I've got to find some other plan B, some other alternative to starting this car. My first thought is I saw a telephone pole in the distance in front of us. And I thought, like, I am going to ram us into this telephone pole as fast as I can get this car going.
Yeah.
As I went for the ignition, I pulled the keys out of the ignition and dropped them to the floor and said, hey, shit, I dropped the keys, which gave the other agents there an opportunity to surround the car that we were in. And when that happened, the worst gunfight that you can imagine ever created, like through Hollywood, through television, it was a million times worse than that.
Ugh.
It was a 10-second like lead and glass storm inside this car that the suspect was killed. I mean, they ventilated this dude.
Yeah.
He was shot to shit. But in the process, I was shot.
So you were shot by friendly fire?
I was shot by the suspect. He had his gun to my head, ultimately to my back. But in this exchange of gunfire, he shot me.
Oh, okay.
And, man, there's no other way to really describe it other than it's the cost of doing business, man. We are engaging, we are encountering violent people with violent intentions.
Yeah.
And if we're not, as lawmen and women, if we are not prepared to encounter violence and then use an equal or greater amount of violence to contain that situation, man, then it's a good day to either rethink how you get up and go to work today or find something else to do. Man, the world needs insurance salesmen too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That is true. I mean, when I was working at LAPD backgrounds, you would have a candidate kind of get a real look at police work and withdraw. And it wasn't a bad thing. Like, you weren't supposed to chase them and be like, hey, this guy's a perfect candidate. He's athletic. He's this, he's that, the other thing. If someone makes that decision on their own, no shame in that. Don't get into it then. Don't waste all the time and resources in training you and then go to have your first intense call and then go, nah, I'm no good.
It's not for everybody. And, talking about undercover work is nothing more than a tool in an investigator's toolbox. There's so many different ways to do the job and to be great about the job. So, like, undercover work's not for everybody. Being on patrol is not for everybody either. Being in supervision is not for everybody.
Right.
But there is an element to the job that is probably right for you. And sometimes it takes a while being on the job and having all these experiences to figure out, what am I good at? What is my strength? What can I be great at?
Right.
I think that for all of us, obsession typically beats talent. If you're obsessed with something and if you are focused to be great, to be amazing, you don't necessarily need to be the most talented person. Let that obsession carry you. Then when you take obsession and couple that with talent, now you have, an amazing lawman. You have Jerry Rice in football. You have that special experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, look at people like Michael Jordan, got cut from his high school basketball team, but was absolutely obsessed with basketball and just kept at it. And we all know where he ended up.
You take that obsession and then you put it with these like amazing, unique skills and talents, and then you have these world-changing athletes. But there's world-changing lawmen and lawwomen out there too that do have the talent to do some aspect of the job uniquely incredible. And then when you put that obsession with that to be the very best you can be, to try to do the job better than anybody's ever done it, then you get amazing accomplishments. It's just the world in which we take our talents and our obsession into.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen that on the show. I've had people come on that were cybercrime guys. And so a lot of guys that might sound like, oh, I don't want to do that. These guys are taking down hardcore child molesters all the time, which is incredible. And their talents lie in digital investigations. They know how to get these guys. They know how to, they've learned how to chat like a 14-year-old girl. You know what I mean? They are taking down some of the worst men we have in our country.
They're taking their obsessions and their talents, and they're putting their dent in the universe. They're changing the world through what they do and how they do it. And that, my hat's off to those men and women that are doing that. I personally could not do that job. I personally could not be like a child crimes investigator,
exposed to that all the time.
Investigator. I wouldn't be good at that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a certain temperament to be able to do it.
Definitely unique people that we should all admire, that give that piece of their life to trying to protect people, innocent people that can't protect or defend themselves, stepping in and doing something about the criminals in that world. We need to honor those people.
Absolutely. I remember that when I was young on the job, one of our detectives was going to like a child interview it was called the Children's Cove or something in my area, and they were doing an interview with a child with the dolls and all this stuff about being molested. And I was like, and it was a small enough agency where the detectives were catch-alls, like they didn't have a specialty. And I just remember like the guy just being bummed he had to go do it. It was important. He knew he had to do it, but it was like really hard doing that case.
Well, and if you catch, like a one-off, that's the investigation you're working, that's one thing. But there's guys and gals that do that every day after day,
yes,
that are carrying multiple caseloads, like keeping yourself mentally and emotionally and spiritually healthy in that life. Ooh.
Yeah, you got to be on your knees 3 times a day, minimum.
Thank goodness that God loves cops.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Let me ask before I move on to the next question. When you were shot and waiting for the lead storm to end, was there anything in your mind like that's got to be life-changing how you look at the world, even like almost, I know when anybody gets a medical scare it kind of changes them for at least a short time, but you were in death's doorstep. Did that in any way affect or impact your desire to continue on? I mean, day one you're shot.
Steve, I always had faith in my life. Regretfully, I didn't always live a life that reflected my faith, but I did learn that, and through, not through just that event, through other events, but the culmination is that I came to realize that I've made a million mistakes in my life. I've done a million things wrong. I have millions of regrets, but between God and my family and my friends, they've given me 1,000,001 second chances to try to get it right. And so through all these adventures and these ups and downs, that has been the consistent, that I feel like God has had his hand on my shoulder.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that, man. Jay, can you describe the most strange or most bizarre thing you've dealt with in your career?
Oh man, that's such a hard question because there's been so many.
I bet.
An interesting investigation is that we had my partner and I do need to say this, especially to all those young lawmen and women out there, we don't accomplish anything on this job by ourselves. There's always multiple people involved in anything that we're doing. And that's been my case. The people that I surrounded myself with, I was smart enough to surround myself with great lawmen and lawwomen that made me better and fixed things and covered things for me and taught me, and all those things that come with learning the job. But
Sure.
We had befriended, my partner and I had befriended a bomb builder, and I didn't think that he was anything out of the ordinary necessarily of what we were encountering. But during the process of the investigation, like I'm standing in the parking lot of a restaurant with an armful of pipe bombs that I had just sold him. And he said, "Hey man, I've got a problem I need some help with. This guy's been giving my girlfriend a hard time, and I want to go confront him. I want to go tighten him up." Well, I'm standing there with an armful of pipe bombs. I'm like, "Man, I'm not getting involved in your personal business."
Yeah, really.
That's not what I'm about, man. You figure out your own personal life. I'm trying to figure out mine. Well, in the process, this guy goes out that same day and murders this target.
Wow.
But we had befriended him, and we had gained his trust, and through him and he leaves Arizona and goes to New Mexico to go on the run. His girlfriend calls, delivers us all the evidence of the crime, bloody clothes, the gun, everything.
Wow.
We put a scam together, and we convinced this guy that we're making a dope run in Albuquerque, and we're going to pick him up. He was in a little town, hiding in a little town called Las Vegas, New Mexico.
Never heard of it.
And yeah, it's just a little innocent, sweet little town, right? Where this guy had some family. So we convinced him we were making a dope run into Albuquerque. We used a sheriff's department surveillance plane with a sheriff's department pilot. We loaded the plane with some bundles of marijuana, landed in the middle of the night in Las Vegas, New Mexico, scooped up this murder suspect that we had bought the bombs from. He gets in the plane. He smells, the raw, uncut weed. He knows like our cover story is coming true for him. And in this process, between the flight between Albuquerque and back to Tucson, he entirely confesses his involvement in this murder.
Wow.
And he does it like over the Dave Clark headphones, like with, like in perfect, with a perfect audio capture.
Right.
We convinced him we were going to bring him back to Tucson and help him, give him new IDs and help him create a new identity. So we land in Tucson, the SWAT team takes him off, but like, you can't make stuff up like that. You can't even really imagine something happening like that. You're just dealing with an event real time and trying to be smart and clever and unique, and doing it on the fly. And that's, so much of our job. You can train and you can be educated and you can study and you can go through practical exercises, but the time comes where it's real time and you're on the point and you have to perform.
That is great. You guys must have been in that plane. Like, were you able to look at each other at all? Like this is awesome.
Like, man, this dude is giving it all up. He's giving it all up. That was a case that when we landed and the SWAT team took this guy down, I thought, we are never going to see a courtroom in this case. That, like, we have too
Ironclad.
much evidence. This is too big of a quality case to ever. This guy can't take this before a judge and a jury. What does he do? He takes it before a judge and a jury. And literally within an hour after the testimony was done, we were already being called back to the courtroom because the jury had reached their conclusion.
I bet.
They put a 25 to life lick on this guy. Yeah.
Wow, that is insane. And like you said, you could the whole point of the podcast, you cannot make this stuff up. The stuff law enforcement gets into and sees.
Well, we're talking about the entertainment world, and people in Copland see cop shows, and you kind of roll your eyes. You're like, man, that's not how we do it. That's not what it looks like. That's not what it sounds like. Because so many of those stories are the invention or the imagination, the fictionalization of some event in some writer's eyes that never touched our world.
Yeah.
The truth is always so much stranger than the fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I have to assume you've been Hollywood has reached out to you. You've gotten emails from people looking to do projects, having you involved. That's got to be something you deal with.
I have a little bit, especially in retirement. Probably the most involved one is that I was hired as a consultant for a movie called Den of Thieves. And I worked with and coached and helped train the characters, the actors that played law enforcement officers in that movie. The lead in that film was an actor named Gerard Butler, who's
he's great.
an amazing actor, super good dude. I worked very close with him. His character in that film was built to some extent behind me and behind my persona and my character. Which is not a flattering statement to make. If anybody's seen Den of Thieves and they've seen Jerry Butler portray the character Big Nick Flanagan, which was a derivative of Jay Dobyns, it's not a flattering characterization.
I got to watch it.
It's authentic. It's just not. It's not pretty. It's not clean.
Right. Yeah, man. It sounds like a hell of a movie. Fair warning. I knew the podcast was starting to get eyes on it when I once in a while I'll get an email from a director or a producer or somebody, and I think these guys they're savvy. They have assistants out there listening to podcasts and coming, so they start, they will lightly poach the podcast and be like, hey, I won't name names, but it's happened 5 or 6 times where it's like, hey, episode blah, 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 blah. We're trying to get in contact with your guest. And how I do it is I say, okay, well, I'm not giving you any of their information. I reach out to the person and I say, are you interested? And half the time, half of them, they said no. These guys are retired. They have grandkids or they're trying to have family time, and they already know about Hollywood, and they're like, I'm good. So I have to write back to the director and be like, hey, sorry, but he's just not interested.
But I do think, like, in credit to Hollywood, smart producers, smart directors, smart actors, they are looking to put themselves next to the real deal players.
Yeah.
Because if they're trying to be true to their story, they want to be authentic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, credit to them for listening to a podcast like this and finding the real deal,
100%.
Absolutely. Jay, obviously want to hear about the infiltration of the Hells Angels. The next question is the most intense or terrifying thing that you dealt with, but I'm assuming this will be that experience is an amalgamation of probably all these questions I've asked, but can you talk about getting into the Hells Angels and how that all went down?
Well, I think that probably I can dovetail things a little bit with regards to the Hells Angels investigation and that infiltration.
Great.
There was a super intense, many very intense days and times and elements to that. But at one point in that case, the cover story that we were using came under question. And so, I'm playing 20 questions with a bunch of Hells Angels with guns held to my head, being questioned as to whether my cover story is legitimate and authentic. And these are dudes, these are some of the baddest cats on the planet.
Yeah.
The Hells Angels have their PhDs in violence and intimidation. They're very good at it. And in my research, in preparing for that investigation and getting rolling on it, the one thing that stood out to me is that they are willing to kill their own. They will kill their own membership if they feel betrayed or compromised, or they're being given up. And so, when that cover story was being questioned, and when you're being asked questions with a gun point blank at your head, your heart's beating 1,000,000 miles an hour, but your hand can't shake. You got to stay in role. You got to stay authentic. You're trying to not only talk your way through that conflict, you're trying to stay alive.
Yeah. So you got to think, like, what would the guy I'm playing do in this situation? What would his reaction be?
And I think, that comes with not only training, but with experience. And you have to, like anything, when we make mistakes, when we get things wrong, can we identify them and can we fix it and not repeat those things? So when the opportunity came up to work on the Hells Angels, like, I'd already had 15 years of undercover experience. behind me. Like, I didn't just walk into that case or roll into that case.
Right.
I was presented the opportunity, but by that time in my career, like I had bought guns undercover, from Saturday Night Special street guns to shoulder launched rockets. I'd bought
Wow.
narcotics, from dime bags and 8 balls, to cartel level dope. I'd bought explosives, from homemade PVC pipe bombs to servo activated remote control C4 devices. I'd
Wow.
worked home invasion investigations. I'd played a contract killer in murder for hire cases. So I had a pretty good base of experiences. I was never a biker investigator. I was never a good biker, to be quite honest with you, but I was able to convince them that I was someone that they could believe in and trust and be loyal to and believe in.
What was the first contact like? Like, how did you? That's got to be the one of the most nerve-wracking parts, like getting introduced, or kind of like, it must have been through somebody, right? You didn't just drive up to a clubhouse and go, "Hey, can I be an angel?"
Yeah, we ultimately, myself and the undercover team I was working with, there were some steps along the way, but the first really big event was we were, in the Hells Angels terms, invited to come to the Mesa, Arizona clubhouse. Really, we were ordered to come to the Mesa Hells Angels clubhouse. And when we pulled up out front, there was some trepidation. Like, we hadn't been in that world, we hadn't been in that environment before, and we were confronted on the street by a bunch of Hells Angels with guns and baseball bats, and playing 20 questions with us. And we make our way to the front door of the clubhouse, and I had a shoulder rig that I carried twin Glocks in. It was part of my
Nice.
character, part of
Yeah.
my persona. And so Hell's Angels confronts me, and he puts his arm across the doorway, and he says, "Man, you can't come in here with those guns on." And I knew that was, in essence, a moment of truth. And there was many moments of truth during the course of that case, but that was like the first big one. And my response was pretty simple, and it was pretty organic. It was authentic. I was like, "Man, I don't take my guns off for anybody. I'm not taking them off for you. You think you guys are the only people out there that got enemies? You think you're the only people out there that people don't like, that want to come after you? So I'll sit out here on the sidewalk. I'm fine with that. If you don't want me in your house, it's your spot, but I ain't taking my guns off."
Yeah.
And I think that response was authentic. It was believable in that world. It made sense to them. And they
Yeah.
gave me the pass, and they're like, you know what? Come on in.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. I know
There's these moments in time where you make a decision. You make the best decision you can. You make it within your cover story, within your role, within your persona, within the character you're portraying, and you hope it works.
And absolutely. What do you do? Have there must be like a bunch of hangs you have with them. They need to get to know you, right? As a dude. I'm sure that just involves like being around them, helping them out with stuff like that.
A big portion of that case is, like, I was nothing more than a step and fetch. I was being told where to be, when to be there, how to act, how to conduct myself, all within the protocols of their world, which I was learning on the fly. But I had ingratiated myself to some people that were shot callers, that were basically teaching me what club life was like on the fly.
Yeah. And is it right away? Like what was your backstory? Like who were you to them?
When the case started, there were a couple significant events that helped cement like the need for the investigation. The Hells Angels and the Mongols motorcycle gang were in this long-standing bloodbath war. They got into a public riot at a casino in Laughlin, Nevada, at the Harrah's Casino, where they were shooting and stabbing and beating each other, hundreds of these guys, underneath closed circuit television cameras. It was all caught, for the public to see.
Right.
I was with the Angels the night of that riot. There was another event where the Hells Angels in Mesa, Arizona, had brought a woman to their clubhouse to party, a lady named Cynthia Garcia. Cynthia said the wrong thing at the wrong place in the wrong time. She insulted the Hells Angels in their house, surrounded by Hells Angels. And they boot stomped her to the brink of death on the floor of the Mesa Hells Angels clubhouse, which is where I started, which is this event that I told you where we showed up and I was being confronted with my guns. That was the same location that they had murdered Cynthia Garcia in, or at least brought her to the brink of death. When they realized what they had done, they had this woman like half dead, bleeding to death on the floor of their clubhouse. They wrapped her up in a piece of carpet and stuffed her in the trunk of a car and drove her into the desert and cut her head off.
Oh.
So those were some of the events, and those were the types of people that we were trying to, like I said earlier, get to know, gain their confidence, gain their trust. With trust, sometimes comes loyalty, sometimes comes love. And I was surrounded by a bunch of really amazing lawmen and lawwomen, and we were able to accomplish that. We were able to make them believe us.
Yeah. In doing this, did you meet Hell's Angel members that you were like, you could see the good in them, and you kind of thought, what a shame that this friggin' guy's involved in this, because I feel like he doesn't have the heart for this, or you know what I mean? People that were good, had some good in them still?
100%. Not every person that's wearing a Hell's Angels vest fits the stereotype. Not everybody's a murderer or a rapist or a gun dealer or a drug trafficker or an addict or whatever that stereotype might be. I crossed paths with people, hundreds of Hell's Angels over the course of the 2 years that I was undercover in that case. Hundreds of Hell's Angels. Some were pretty likable, were pretty charming, were people that were like I actually enjoyed being in their presence, that I had developed legitimate friendships with.
Sure.
In an undercover role, you can never really undercover completely out of the human factor. There's going to be people you like. There's going to be people you don't like, and vice versa. There was Hell's Angels that liked me. There was Hell's Angels that didn't like me. It was very human. The human element of it is still there when you're working undercover. And there were people that I developed affection for.
Sure. Yeah, I guess when you look at it from the outside, it's like it's all very one-dimensional. You just picture like a big muscly dude with like tattoos all over him, and just like with a bunch of other guys like that just want to kick ass and hurt people. You know what I mean? You kind of take the human element out of it because that's all we've been fed.
And everything in between. And for those people that I enjoyed their company, enjoyed being around, there was also people that I knew, do not turn your back to this dude because he's dangerous. He's trouble.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a certain amount of pecking order and things they allow within that. So it's not like someone would be held accountable if you beat the bag out of you, right?
Well, they portray themselves to be these fun-loving rascals who have this common denominator of the love of riding motorcycles and the brotherhood. But they don't want to live by society's laws and rules. When you see behind the curtain, when you get face to face with that lifestyle, there's tons of bylaws and rules and internal laws,
yeah.
More so than we have in society. The things that they're rejecting from society, they're reinforcing internally.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's you can't help it. There's always going to be hierarchy. There's always going to be laws and order, because otherwise they wouldn't have a club if they didn't have law and order within.
Well, and there's so many elements like to the policies and procedures and protocols of that world, and I was learning those things on the fly. At one point, a Hell's Angels told me, when you meet another Hell's Angel and you got riding gloves on, take your glove off, man. Shake hands with these guys skin to skin. That's a sign of respect. Like, I always had sunglasses on. When you meet somebody for the first time, take your sunglasses off and look them in the eye and let them see your eyes. That's a sign of respect. These were all these things I was being coached through and learning, like trial by fire.
Yeah.
Something that I would not personally take as offensive in that world might be offensive to someone. So you're trying to figure out, like, man, like, I'm trying to make this as smooth as I can make it. I'm trying to be as accepted as I can be, but you got to play the game. And you're in their world now. You're not playing by your rules. You're not playing by society's rules or by the rules of law enforcement. You're playing by their rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's funny because that makes sense to me. Take your glasses off. Let me see your eyes. Take your glove off when you shake somebody's hand. Like, I do that. Like, if I meet somebody and I have a glove on, I'll take my glove off. So it's a more personal, like, type of thing.
It's just a simple display of respect.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. What is their general attitude towards, like, the uniformed officers? Say you get a group of them ripped through town or the city you work in, and they're speeding, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna pull over this flock, this herd of Hell's Angels, because I'm not gonna let them just speed through town because they're Hell's Angels. I'm gonna stop them and give them a warning or whatever you're gonna do. What is their attitude towards that?
Well, I'll say this to any patrolmen out there that encounter a pack of not just Hell's Angels, of bikers. You mentioned it earlier. Excuse me. There is a hierarchy. There is a pecking order within that group. So don't waste your time talking to some prospect. Don't waste your time talking to Jaybird, who has no influence or isn't making decisions. Just ask him, who's in charge? Who's running this show? That's who I need to speak to. Typically, their response will be met with, I don't know if respect is the right word, but that's what you go through. That, like, find out who is making the decisions, who's calling the shots, and deal with that guy. Because you'll end up dealing with a bunch of knuckleheads who want a profile. They want to show off. They want to show who they are, and you don't need to sort through all those guys.
Yeah.
Find out who the shot caller is. Say, like, that's who I need to speak to, and then handle your business.
Yeah, that's interesting. My dad reminds me of my dad dealt with him. He was a cop on Cape Cod for 30 years, and they had him at a campsite one year, and they took this couple's dog. This group of Hell's Angels, and they were always cooking meat or something at their site. So they were feeding the golden retriever. So where's the retriever going to go? To that campsite, because they're feeding it bacon grease. Well, now it's their dog, according to them. So this couple is, like, distraught. They're telling the workers at the campsite, like, hey, they stole our dog. And the Angels are like, that's our dog. What are you talking about? That's our dog. And they're like, you came here on motorcycles. How'd you take a dog with you? And the people have the licenses and rabies. And so obviously the campsite's like, we're not prying a dog away from the Hell's Angels. So they called the police, and it was just my dad and one other guy. And my dad said when he showed up, the other cop was being slowly surrounded by him. It was dark outside the campfire. You know how campfires work. And there was a guy sitting there kind of talking with him, the lead guy. And the other guys were kind of encircling the cop, and they're out in the middle of the woods. So my dad said he showed up and drew his gun, and he went over and just stood in front of the guy who seemed to be the shot caller with his gun out. And the guy kind of gave a hand signal, and the guys all kind of came back, and they gave the dog back, and that was it.
Well, they're very good at intimidation. That's what they do. They're the masters of it. But they also understand that the quote unquote gang of cops is bigger and more powerful than their gang.
Right.
So Do they want to hurt a cop? Do they want to get out of line with a cop? In the big picture, they don't. There's no
Right.
upside for them in that. Man, they're going to get overrun. The blue wave would hit them and smother them.
Yeah.
They're smart enough to know, and do you want to get in a fight over a dog?
Right.
At the same time, like the citizen, the civilian that goes into that situation and says, hey, I'm here to get my dog, he's going to have a much different result than uniform officers showing up saying, hey, come on, you guys. Like give these folks their dog back.
Right. And that was kind of the vibe of the whole thing. They were never upset. They were smoking and joking, and they weren't even upset that a cop took his gun out. They were just kind of like, all right, we pushed it to as far as we want to push it. Give the dog back. You know what I mean? That was kind of the thing. They were, to them, it was a big game almost. They were having a good time.
Well, you know what? They're going to get away with what they can get away with. And so, you know what? Welcome to society.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Jay, so you get accepted and you're in the mix with them, kind of doing whatever tasks they give you, kind of earning their trust. What was a major intense moment that you had with them?
Well, the way we made our way, especially like for myself, who was like, I was not a biker investigator. I was not an expert in that culture. We established and ran what we called street theaters regularly on these guys. And street theater is inaccurate conclusions based on accurate observations. So I would accurately invite and allow the Hells Angels to see me in crime events. I would allow them to participate in a gun deal, a drug deal, a debt collection.
Interesting.
And what they didn't realize was that these street theaters were just that. They were skits. They were hoaxes where all the people involved, with the exception of the Hells Angels themselves, were lawmen and law women who were acting out a role. So if they saw me in a drug deal, they would accurately conclude that I was dealing drugs or a gun deal or a debt collection. What they didn't understand was that the person on the other side of that transaction or the event was another undercover cop who was playing a role, was playing
awesome.
The drug mule, was playing the gun runner, was playing the victim of the debt collection. But in their eyes, they would accurately conclude that I was running drugs, running guns, doing debt collections. From an inaccurate observation that it wasn't truthful. We were setting up plays and skits for them to be active participants in order to substantiate and add to our credibility.
That's amazing.
And what? Seeing's believing.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I tell you that I'm a debt collector and I tell you debt collector stories, it's never going to be as good as if I invite you into it and you're there and you're present and you see and smell and feel and hear a debt collection. And then they would tell their friends, hey man, I went with him with the dude. I backed him up. He paid me off in the parking lot. I saw him do the collection with my own eyes. That was more advancing of my cover and my credibility than any story I could tell them.
That's amazing. Yeah, and you could really spice it up. You could tell the guy, hey, I'm gonna grab you, or refuse to pay me at first. I'll grab you, and then they can see me get a little physical.
Well, the most audacious street theater that we pulled is, backing up a little bit in the story, from the very first day that I was around the Hells Angels, I was being told to kill Mongols. They had, like I said earlier, they had this long-standing bloodbath war with the Mongols motorcycle gang. And I was being told, it's your responsibility to kill Mongols. So the most audacious street theater we pulled is I went to the Hells Angels and said, there's a Mongol in Mexico. He's running his mouth. He's saying that they're going to start pushing Mexican meth right up into Arizona, right into Sonny Barger's backyard. There's nothing you can do about it. They kicked our ass at Laughlin. They're laughing at us. I want to go down there to Mexico and kill this Mongol. I want to prove myself. So that plan was embraced. They gave me the gun. They gave me the instructions. This is how you do it. Here's the gun to do it with.
Wow.
So we go out, we go into the desert. We have a Mongol vest that was seized from the ATF had infiltrated the Mongols in Los Angeles. An agent named Billy Queen, who wrote the book Under and Alone. There was evidence seized from that case. We took a Mongol vest. We took a living, breathing member of our task force, dressed him up in this Mongol cut,
Wow.
duct taped his hands and his feet, dug a shallow grave in the desert, and hired a homicide detective to build us a crime scene. And then using like bits and pieces and blood from the butcher shop, he built a crime scene to make this victim look like he'd been beaten and shot. We took pictures of the crime scene. We took the bloody Mongol vest, took it back to the Hells Angels, told them the story, showed them physical evidence of this homicide that we had created. It was a massive, audacious street theater of us selling a murder to murderers.
Wow. And did that resonate at all back to the Mongols?
You know what? It was at the very end of the case, and very quickly after that, the investigation was closed. But that was one of the like very obvious concerns with this street theater play. How are you going to avoid like re-inflaming this war between these two?
Right.
Part of the cover story was like, look, this guy's a loner Mongol. He's down there by himself in Mexico. No one's going to miss him. No one's going to know he's gone. We tried to build into that story at least enough backstory that would have kept it alive for a while. But very quickly after that event, then we had our indictments and our raids and our arrests and things like that. So it never really had a chance to fully take hold.
That's incredible, man. Yeah, I'm assuming it was planned because you were coming to a conclusion. You're like, all right, we don't have to perpetuate this this murder way into the next couple of years.
Well, what had the case stayed alive, that street theater, like in my own short-sightedness, probably would have created some pretty big problems, some problems that I might not have been able to invent answers to. But knowing that the case was coming to an end, it allowed us to be like hyper risk aggressive.
Okay. And when you were there, were you made an official Hell's Angel, or were you kind of working on that the whole time?
Well, that's, the dispute between me and the Hells Angels, that the Hells Angels, in their defense of our infiltration said, he was never a Hells Angel. He never received the national, international vote that he needed to be sanctioned as a full member. That is 100% true. They never took a full vote on me. Our case ended before that. But after we displayed this Mongol murder, the members of the charter that I was in, I was with the Skull Valley charter. I was prospecting for the Skull Valley Hells Angels. The leadership of that charter, they said, hey, man, you're a Hells Angel. Like, just give us time to get you made official. Give us time to get your vote. There was a Hells Angel that actually put his vest on my back and said, wear this cut until we get you your own.
Wow.
And so within my charter, they were like, hey, man, you're a Hells Angel. You've shown you've got what it takes. You took care of business. Like, let us handle the politics of this. And me and my partner actually gave the vests that they had given us back. And our position was like, look, we came in the front door. We're not going to like become members through the back door. And like the mentality was also like, man, I'm not wearing another man's cut. I'm not
Right.
wearing somebody else's vest. And my mentality was, it doesn't really matter anyways. The vest itself doesn't make me a Hell's Angel. The man makes you a Hell's Angel. And so those answers I gave them were credible answers and believable answers in their world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Damn, man. Is there a ceremony or something when you actually get your vest, your colors?
You know what? I think there's some, I don't know what word to use, myth behind that. I can't speak universally to the Hells Angels. I know that I was present where members were patched in, and it wasn't like maybe what stereotypically or through myth we're allowed to believe. My personal experience, the experience I went through, wasn't um, wasn't some massive party where it was some like large indoctrination.
Gotcha. It's funny to me hearing you talk about it because as crazy and scary as those dudes are, like it does sound a little bit like, well, you're a member, but we gotta run up the flagpole to corporate, like there's actual organization,
100%. And I think that, well, not I think, I know from personal experience, there's politics involved in that organization, just like there is in any big business. The Hells Angels are an international organized crime syndicate. There's probably close to 5,000 members, um, probably over 500 charters. They're in 50 or 60 different countries. They're international, and nothing happens within a vacuum. Like those big decisions all require a vote, all
Yeah.
require politicking.
Yeah, they have. I mean, they have because of a investigation I had with a motorcycle club. There, I got online and I was looking all around, and the Hell's Angels have like legit like merchandise, like a website, like they're big business.
100%. They sell their swag, their support gear. Um, Not every penny coming into that organization is through criminal activity. They've learned how to churn money in a legitimate way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's part of like the lore of America at this point. The Hell's Angels, they're like a piece of America.
They're Americana.
Yeah,
They're part of American history, part of Crime and Punishment and true crime stories, and throughout their history, there's event after event after event that the Hells Angels are front and center. They're the most powerful, most recognized outlaw motorcycle gang that the planet has ever seen, probably ever will see. And that's, to some extent, why they have conflict and rivalry with other gangs, because there's jealousy there. Everybody wants to be the king of the mountain.
yeah,
But you know what? If you want to be the heavyweight champ, you have to knock the champ out to get his belt.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So when I've heard stories of like lawyers or doctors becoming Hell's Angels or wanting to become Hell's Angels. Like, is that? I mean, that to me is like an oxymoron. Like, it's like, wait, you're like a working professional with a high paying career, and you've had this probably because of the Americana of it. Like it's romantic to you to be a Hell's Angels, and I've heard that they have like a spot for them, but they're not real like street angels. They're more like they get in, but they're not required to do all the dark stuff. Is there any truth to that?
Well, that was not my personal experience. Like the doctor lawyer element to it was not my personal experience. I can't say that it is or it isn't true. Um, I will say this: there was one example. A Hell's Angel that I got relatively close to was an America West pilot. This guy was flying a commercial jet with hundreds of civilian passengers on it. He was a Hell's Angel.
Wow, that's got to screw up your background investigation. I have to believe.
Well, we're talking the infiltration that I was a part of was between 2001 and 2003, and the world has quickly changed over the last 20 years. Like having a backstory and having that covered was much easier to do 20 years ago than it is today.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It is like incredibly, like even doing a background on a police candidate, they try to delete their Facebook and Instagram, and all of a sudden like this 24-year-old kid's like, oh, I don't have social media. And you're like, right. So you sit down make them sit down, and they can just reactivate it all, and then boom, there it is. You know what I mean? You can't get rid of it.
And with ATF has an extensive undercover program, and there's an entire unit within that undercover program that helps build reliable, verifiable backstopping for our undercovers. So Jay Davis, the gun running, bomb buying, debt collector, quasi hitman, he was a real person at that time and place.
Yeah.
The Hells Angels, on more than one occasion, hired a private investigator to find out behind my back, like, tell us about Jay Davis. Well, those private investigators were coming back with the same story that I was giving the Hells Angels because my backstopping was so incredible. And so through their own private investigators, they were confirming my credibility. Not until the case ended did they find out that Jay Davis, this criminal character, was Jay Dobyns, an ATF agent.
Incredible. Yeah, I know there's some troopers in Mass that I've worked with in the past that have their registration, their car comes back to a different person. They have a Mass issued driver's license that comes back to a person that is not real. It's just their persona. They have everything covering their bases because everybody, all the guys you're investigating have ability to run plates and run licenses because somebody in their organization will know a dispatcher who's a little bit, whatever. Somebody who has access to CGIS that will do that for you. You know what I mean? They're not necessarily criminals, but their boyfriend is a scumbag. You know what I mean? And they will do favors, and they can find 100%. Out who you are.
And they actively recruit those sources. They actively recruit and try to befriend people that can do those things for us, that can give us insider information on what the plan is for law enforcement within the court system. All those things. They're looking for allies.
Yeah.
They're looking they're doing their own investigations. They're looking for intelligence.
Yeah, they're trying to get in. I know when I was at Backgrounds, somebody had a case with this girl, young Latino girl, and she had a little crown, and she was trying to say it was because I'm a princess or, whatever, and trying to get through Backgrounds. And it turned out she had recently joined a gang, and that was, the Latin Kings or whatever gang it was, but it wasn't super easy to figure it out, but she was trying to become a police officer for LA, and then imagine what she would have access to then. Everything.
Well, it has happened, and not just with the Hells Angels, with any criminal organization. It has happened. It will continue to happen. Like, how do we avoid it? How do we avoid those infiltrations? Really hard to do. Even with extensive background investigations, really hard to do.
Yeah, it is. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. We just have to be as careful as we can be. And now it's like the backgrounds on the bigger agencies, anyways, and for the feds are take a long time. And like you're photographing tattoos, you're doing polygraphs and all that stuff. Which it's not like you said, it's not 100%, but it does do a pretty good job.
Well, and even within the criminal community, they're administering their own polys now in order to gain membership into a criminal gang or a criminal organization. Like, you got to survive a polygraph.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, they're just as paranoid as the police about hiring the wrong person.
Yeah, and you know what? The criminal community, not just the Hells Angels, the criminal community in general, is uniquely paranoid. And they're paranoid for a reason. They're untrusting for a reason. They don't like outsiders for a reason. It's because that's how they stay out of jail. That's how
Right.
they stay out of prison. That paranoia helps keep them insulated and helps keep them safe. So as law enforcement, how do we overcome that paranoia? Um, if there was a magic answer to that, then we'd all know it. There's not.
Right. Yeah, because I'm sure they're aware now that undercover agents and cops are getting backstories and built in the digital space about them. So, they're going to have to get
Well, and as
crafty.
these stories become public, as not just my story, like multiple stories, hundreds of stories, ultimately become public, becomes harder and harder and harder to do that job.
Right. Absolutely. When it all culminated and you brought the charges and arrested everybody, was there ever an opportunity, or did you ever speak with them again? Did you see them after they knew this guy was a cop the whole time?
Yeah, I've had a couple encounters, some more pleasant than others. Um, I did have one Hell's Angel when I was revealed to him that I was actually an agent, and I told him, I said, "Hey man, like I'm an ATF agent, man, and all the things that we said and did together, man, you're accountable for." He looked at me and he said, "You know what? That's the first true thing that you have ever said to me."
Oh man. Oh my goodness. He must have just been defeated.
Well, you know what? No one wants to be betrayed. Nobody likes being deceived,
Sure.
it's hurtful. It's embarrassing at times. We've all gone through it in various levels of our life.
Sure.
It's a very unenjoyable experience for any of us to have, to be betrayed, to be tricked, to be fooled. They're no different. They're pissed off about it. I understand that. Um, like I had a job to do, and my job was to get next to the Hells Angels violence and investigate it, find out who's who in the zoo, find out who's issuing the orders, who's carrying out the events, what their role was. Um, I understand that they don't like that they are angry about it. It's not hard to understand why, but I had a job to do. Um, I didn't violate the law. I didn't violate our policies or our procedures in doing it.
Right.
Me and the people that I was surrounded with, and other people in other investigations, are good at what we do. Um, and so I understand that they don't feel that deception is playing fair from the law enforcement side, from the side of the equation. But deception and undercover work is sanctioned as legal and moral and ethical in every state.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is. It's a tool in the investigator's toolbox.
Yeah. I remember learning that they teach in academy. This is a ruse. You can lie to these people to get the conviction. It's fair play. You're the one breaking the law. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of the old school guys do understand that. Like, hey, look, this guy had a job to do. He did it the best he could. We don't like it. We wish it hadn't been done against us, but we understand that the guy had a job to do. A lot of those old school guys do, like I said, they don't like it, but they do understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when this all went down, did it all go down? Was it pretty smooth, the arrest? It just kind of everybody got taken in. No gunfights, no crazy stuff.
Well, you know what, we ran, I think we indicted 55 Hells Angels and Associates. 16 were indicted on RICOs, which means arrests and search warrants and raids. There was a shootout at one of the clubhouses during one of the raids. So ultimately, and a very frustrating element to this case is that when it went to the attorneys, there was arguments on how to present the case, how to deliver the case through discovery and through those other elements. And in order to gain some convictions and in order to keep other cases alive and to not compromise sources, there were charges that were dismissed. There were charges that were reduced. Um, as the operative, when you're in the middle of it, and when the case goes into the legal side, it doesn't always work out the way that you plan for it to. Like, you've turned your investigation over to somebody else,
Yeah.
and now they do their part in it. They do their job in it. So you look at 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears and risk and spending time away from your family and all that battle damage for it not to play out the way that you believed it should. Man, welcome to Copland.
Yeah. Yeah. That even right down to like an OUI. It's never gonna, it gets into the prosecutors, and then all the things you thought were a slam dunk, all of a sudden there's problems.
Well, Steve, you can probably relate to this. I've never met a cop who didn't think he could prosecute his case better than the attorney that had it. I've never met a prosecutor who didn't think he could investigate a case better than the cop who had
it. Yeah, that is true. The Monday morning quarterbacking is strong in the DA world, in the U.S. attorney, I'm sure.
Well, and those attorneys, they have a hard job to do too. And they're trying to do their jobs the best they can. And so, in this example, as an undercover, it's super frustrating to know that case today, based on evidence, testimony, agent testimony, witness testimony, informant testimony, hundreds and hundreds of hours of audio and video recordings with criminal conversations in them, that case today, based on those elements, is every bit as prosecutable and winnable as it was in 2003. It just doesn't always work out that way.
Right. Yeah. And like a street cop, you can rest assured, you did your part, you did the best you could, you did a great job. And if the powers that be don't see it exactly the same way, what can you do? You can't,
I think any
move
of
on.
us that are on the job, you go out and you do your job the very best you can. And then you have to just live with that. And in the process, like I made mistakes, you have to live with your mistakes too. You have to live with the things you got wrong. It doesn't always pan out the way that you feel that it should. But if you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I did the very best I could, then that has to be where your satisfaction comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. No other way to do it. Now, when the case is over, you're kind of uncoupled yourself from them, obviously. Was there any, how do they like get you out of that scene? How do they protect you? Is there any threats that came in? You know what I mean? Like, or was it far enough away from where you are that it was just kind of like, no problem?
Well, the investigation concludes, and the world is hearing and saying like, oh, this is the first time that the Hells Angels have ever been infiltrated by law enforcement. And like, I allowed myself to think that I was special, that I was important. I ultimately learned very quickly how unspecial and unimportant I was. When Jay Davis, the gun runner, debt collector, hitman, was revealed to be Jay Dobyns, the ATF agent, man, the death threats started pouring in. The Hells Angels had issued a murder contract on me. Elements of the Aryan Brotherhood and the MS-13 and 18th Street picked up on it. There were lone wolves that picked up on it. There were threats against my family, against my wife and my kids.
Oh.
And so that was a very treacherous time. That was a very unsettling time. And I guess ultimately, if you want to take on a case like that, that's the cost of doing business.
Yeah, it's inevitable. So what year did you retire? Did you continue to be an ATF agent for years after this?
That case, the Hells Angels case, ended in 2003. and I retired in 2014.
Woo. So you were still leaving the house and going to work and dealing with all that other stuff coming in.
I was, and this is also, like, to some extent an unflattering statement to make of myself, although it's truthful. If I'm not honest and transparent and truthful with you, then nothing I say has credibility. Um, I had become addicted to undercover work. I had become addicted to presenting that lie and taking those risks. It had become my heroin. So the Hells Angels case ends, man, I couldn't stop. Like, I was still working. I was still working undercover cases. I was doing murder for hire cases and home invasion cases outside the biker world. But nonetheless, like, I couldn't quit on my own. Like, they literally, the agency and the people that cared about me had to do an intervention on me and say, dude, like, you don't get to do this anymore.
Wow.
Like, that was a hard time for me personally, because it was my identity. It
Yeah.
was like, what I did stopped being my employment and it became who I was. And when that happens to any of us, man, that's dangerous, man. That's a very unhealthy place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay, one kind of leads into this question. A lot of people who listen, this is their favorite question. A lot of people are thinking about getting into law enforcement, or they're interested, or they're on the fence. What would your advice be to new police officers, new special agents getting into the field?
Well, we touched on it earlier, and I think it's important. I think that we have to hold on to that mantra of, why did you choose this profession? Like, to defend the weak, to protect the innocent, to take a stand against violence and predators on behalf of good and innocent people in the communities that we work in. And so that's not a job for everybody. It's not always going to treat you well. It's not always going to be happy. You're not always going to go home every day with a good feeling. But life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% what we choose to do about it. And so if you can hold on to those core elements of, like, what attracted you to this job, like what moral and ethical reasons did you choose to become a lawman or a lawwoman? I guarantee you it was not for the paycheck. I've never met a cop who took a badge and a gun and said, I'm doing this because I'm going to get rich.
Right.
I'm going to get famous. Those aren't the reasons. Hold on to those core reasons and continue to serve those through all the conflicts that you'll have in your career. Hold on to those reasons, because that's the basis of why you do this job.
Absolutely. Words of wisdom, brother. The book, No Angel, My Harrowing Undercover Journey to the Inner Circle of the Hells Angels, New York Times bestseller. You got to be proud of that. I mean, do you expect that at all when you wrote that?
For a public school kid, that's quite an achievement.
Yeah. Well done, man. I mean, it's got to be packed with we probably only scratched the surface of your experience doing it. So, and books are always better. Did it take a long time to write, or did it flow out of you?
It did. It took a while, and it was a painful process to write, because people that read it will see it's not a hero story. No Angel is not an I Love Me story. It's a story full of trepidation and mistakes and failures and things that I wish I would have done different or better. It's honest. Like I said earlier, I tried to be transparent in the telling of the story. Not all of it is flattering, but I hope people that read it will understand that and appreciate it. That I'm just trying to convey, like, honestly, what my experiences were during that career event.
Very cool. It's available on Amazon. Jay, honored to have you on the show, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
Steve, thanks for having me. Good luck to your audience out there. Stay safe, stay well, take care of each other. I think, you'd asked for advice. I think a good piece of advice for cops out there, and with some of the mental and emotional trauma that the job brings. Cop suicide is become epidemic, and you can look healthy and not be healthy. You can look happy and present an image that you're happy,
Absolutely,
and not be happy. So if you're struggling, like, reach out to a friend, reach out to a peer, reach out to a family member, reach out to me if you have to. I don't have all the answers, but I'll try to help you find the answers. And I think the most important thing is, like all of us, like, love your God, love your families, love your friends and your partners, but along the way, don't forget to love yourself.
absolutely. Great words, brother. Thank you so much. I'm going to do the outro. Can you hang on for just 3 minutes?
Sure.
All right. The great Jay Dobyns, guys. Wow. Super fun interview. Such a great get for the show. Like I said, I think we just scratched the surface of what this guy's done. I'm in awe of his career. So cool. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you to all the Patreon supporters. This is a time in the show when I thank the Patreon captains, lieutenants, and sergeants. Who I'm talking about is the great Jamin Jack, Security 101 at the captain level. The great and powerful Andy Biggs, lieutenant level. Adam McMahon, Adam Mihal, Ben Peters, Brad Thompson, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, amazing woodworker. Check him out on Instagram. The great Chris June, Clark LaCoff, Dave Ellman, everybody. Dennis Carrasquillo, Detective Nick Adams, Doug and Kelly Newman. Love you guys. See you at church. The great Dylan Mosher, Elliot Sykes, ladies and gentlemen. The great Gary Steiner, the great George Cariotis. Thank you, sir. Greg Gadboy, Jake Pianito, James Rose, the great Jason Labrie, Jason Lau, ladies and gentlemen. Jessica King, the great John Jordan, John Shoemaker, everybody. John and Aaron Kate. Love you guys. See you at church. The great Justin King, Kyle Roberts, Kyle Napier, everybody. The great Lauren Stimson, the handsome Lane Campbell, Lisa Gano, everybody. Michael Roach of Roach Machine AI Solutions, Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles. Check out his podcast. The great Nancy Hammond, Paul Maloney, Raymond Arsenault, everybody. The great Reed Decker, Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, brother. Stay safe out there. Sasha McNabb, Scott Young, Sean Clifford, Seth Wright, the great Sheriff Ronald Long, Tammy Walsh, holding it down at dispatch. Thank you, Tammy. Tony Fahey, ladies and gentlemen. William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long. Do you thank you very much. Zach Haney, the great Zachary Fleet, and the handsome George Tessier. I'll see you at church, brother. Guys, thank you so much for the support, the continued support on Patreon. The link is in the show notes. Also, the link to Jay's book is also in the show notes right at the top. Check him out. Check out his book. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.